Asian Voices, and happy Saturday. Thank you for watching our newest episode. And today, as you can see, is a very special episode because we not only have one, not two, but we have four different guests. And we have three Subtle Asian Voices hosts with us, Jasmine, Tiffany, and Katie. And this is the most number of guests we've ever had on this show. To dedicate it to a special and interesting topic today, and that's the impact of Asian culture on mental health. So our purpose in having different guests with different perspectives is to hope to facilitate an engaging dialogue among the five of us. So guests, can you please introduce yourselves, include your name, ethnicity, where you grew up, and where you're located now? I'll let Kevin go first since he's never been on a show before.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name is Kevin Yi. I am Chinese American, and I'm originally from Boston. Currently live in LA right now.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'm just gonna go down the order of how it appears on my screen. Jasmine, can you go?
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I am Vietnamese American, born in Vietnam, came to Florida when I was like 4.5 and been in Tampa, Florida since.
Okay, great. And Tiffany?
Hey everyone, my name is Tiffany. I consider myself Vietnamese Chinese American. I was born in the DC area, but did spend some time up in Massachusetts for college and work, and now currently rebased back in the DC area.
Okay, great. Thank you. Katie?
Hey everyone, Katie. I am Chinese American and I am born in a small town in Ohio, moved away to another small town in Ohio, and now I'm back near my hometown again.
Okay, great. Thank you guys. So as we could all see, all of us are at different parts within America and we're located in different areas. So I hope that this could facilitate interesting discussions on our perspectives. And also, this is the last episode of our mental health series. And I want to end it by discussing the impact of Asian culture and mental health, because that is the most important determinant of Asian Americans' emotional health. And as Asian Americans, I feel that cultural traditions have a significant impact on how healthy our mindset is, and in some cases could lead to negative thinking patterns and self-destructive behaviors. So it's important to recognize that cultural upbringing has a huge impact on our lives, and in some cases could even lead trauma and baggage. It's not uncommon to see adults reminiscing on their childhood and teenage years and still feel pain and resentment and unable to reconcile with their parents. So we hope this episode could bring some insights on understanding why Asian American parents hold the beliefs they do and give ideas on how to resolve those hard feelings we may still be holding on to. So the title of today's topic is Impact of Cultural Values on Mental Health, but I really want to focus on the negative aspects because we all know that there are a lot of good attributes that come from Asian teaching, such as respecting your elders, being self-disciplined, valuing the family, being hardworking. So these things teach us to be driven and useful members of the society and family. But at the same time, when these values are pushed to the extreme, there are detriments that they ultimately bring. So I want to invite the guests to share their opinion on what happens when these things work against our mental health, and also discuss when Asian household place so much emphasis on success and reputation to the point where it puts our mental health at risk. So I want to invite the guests to share a little bit about their personal stories when Asian parents sometimes use these teachings in the wrong way to justify some of their personal, selfish, and toxic behaviors. And to facilitate the discussion, I'll be referring to three important values in Asian culture, and that's filial piety, family obligations, and modesty. So sorry about the long introduction. Now I'm going to turn it to our guests. First of all, when you hear the term filial piety, what does it elicit in your mind? Is this term new to you? How do you feel about it when you hear that term? Anyone want to share?
Sure, I can start off. So honestly, I hadn't heard of this term until Norman, one of the other SAV guests or SAV hosts, mentioned it during a conversation that we were having where we were planning and putting together content for our channel. And once he explained what it was, it resonated a lot with me because honestly, that was a principle that I was taught growing up.
Yeah.
I just didn't know there was a name for it. And I think that hierarchy that's established by that concept, right, in terms of respecting your parents and being obedient to your parents, establish a sense of order for the family, right? So there was a way that we're supposed to behave, and so we follow it, and there's supposed to be harmony. But it can also be detrimental where you apply that maybe to other parts, or you take it to the extreme, like you said. For me personally, it reflected in my life path. So I understood that my parents had certain expectations for me in terms of career, in terms of my next steps in life. Like I always knew my path was college, corporate American job, marriage and kids. And that was my laid out plan. And I think if you follow it and you're comfortable following it, that's fine. But for me, what I found was I was following it kind of blindly, and I never felt fulfillment following it. And so after spending so many years following that path, I kind of had to take a step back and reflect, am I really happy doing what I thought I was happily chasing? And I think that's something you need to consider, right? Or watch out for.
Yes. Yeah, I think Tiffany brings up an aspect that probably a lot of us have been through, and that is parents feel that they're justified in making major life decisions for us, such as education and career choice. So for our other guests, have you guys been through a similar experience as well?
Yeah, I'll jump in and share. I resonate a lot with Tiffany, even though my parents, on the one hand, growing up, they're always like, you can do whatever it is that you love. We're in America, be whatever it is you need to be. But when it really came down to it, they had in their mind that, you graduate high school, you go to college, definitely go to college, graduate college, and you become, doctor, a lawyer, any professional after that requires additional grad school. So that was something that was just so ingrained. Even though, and I share this a lot with our staff hosts, even though, growing up, they always throw us in extracurricular activities where it's, you're playing whichever instrument that you're playing. That was never a career path. The career path was the academic path. And so, you feel just, you follow the swim lines for so long and it becomes your life. And so veering, left or right in either case just doesn't feel right. And if you do, you have the sense that you are disrespecting your parents' journey, bringing you here, everything that they sacrificed for you, for what? For your quote unquote dreams. And I guess I say that because nowadays I'm more accepted of the fact that I'm a creative. And so being in that swim line for so long, because we grew up so obedient, we're so used to being on that swim line, right? And so stepping outside of that, it's something that's tough to even share with our parents, have that conversation, because they don't understand. They don't understand, and I reflect back on this a lot, not in the sense that they don't care. Of course, we have the root of it. Our parents care, otherwise they wouldn't have done so much for us. I just think that they don't understand, right? Because they grew up in an even narrower, swim lane. And I say all this because I, graduated college, got into a career where I was in healthcare IT, went corporate, and then realized just what Tiffany was sharing is that I don't feel fulfilled. I've reached all of those pinnacle levels, so to speak, that, our parents expect of us. And then that you reach the top and you realize I'm not fulfilled. So what do you do at that point, right? And this kind of segues into something that I've loosely shared with friends, but have never outright said it, publicly. But I left corporate about 3 years ago in an attempt to do my own thing, go on the creative route. And my parents don't know yet. And it's hard to have that conversation. I haven't been able to have that conversation because I feel like I need to reach a new level of success before I can.
Yeah.
Even though I live on my own, take care of myself, and don't need anything from them, so to speak, except their love. It's still very hard to have that conversation. I haven't been able to have that yet.
Of course. Yeah. I think it is quite common for Asian parents to assert control and dominance over their children and think that it's justified, and they feel that it's unacceptable for children to go against their orders. And in the teaching of Confucius, parents are the sky, and what they say is the ultimatum. And there's just it's abominable, it's a shame, and it's a dishonor to go against the wishes of your parents. And I think it is very common for them to tend to make major life decisions and them not seeing the consequences of the impact on our mental health, and how restricted and how little freedom we have, how little control we feel like we have over our lives. And Katie and Kevin, have you been through similar experiences or have those similar feelings as well?
Yeah, for myself, I totally related to what Jasmine was talking about. So just to give people some background, I went a very traditional route of the route of pharmacy. I had a really good career in pharmacy, but almost 3 years ago, I don't know what it is, about three, but I decided to leave my pharmacy career and pursue a career in digital marketing and high ticket sales and all that. And that was really hard. I mean, honestly, it was just really growing up, like, the whole concept of filial piety. I understand the benefit of it. I mean, to this day, I care so much about my mom. I want to make sure she's taken care of because my dad's no longer here. And but there's also that aspect of trying to find something that's fulfilling. And being also on YouTube, there's so many kids, I can tell, like, so many kids feel so pressured because their parents are imposing, like, they have to be in this certain career as well. And it's just really hard because at some point your parents are going to pass away. They're not going to be here anymore. And so at some point you need to figure out what you want to do with your life, because you have to deal with all the consequences, right? With pharmacy school, I'm the one footing the bill for pharmacy. And it was just it's just this, I definitely see the kind of downside of concepts like filial piety, because it doesn't enforce your own independent thinking or anything like that. And it can be very, like, when you're 30 you're trying to figure out everything in your life, it can be very, very overwhelming and anxiety producing as well. So that's kind of like my experience so far.
Exactly. Yeah. And Katie, would you say you agree with that as well?
For sure. And even if it's not like full obedience, my guardians always told me, like, we're just trying to steer you in the right direction. And we never had this opportunity or experiences. So this you shall do this, and then this you shall do. Because they never had that opportunity. So it's time for me to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think all of our testimonies make a strong case about how, although the origin of filial piety is very well intended, but when put into the context of Asian American community, Asian American culture, not Asians in Asia, but being in an environment where it's 21st century and it's where we're growing up in a Western culture, it creates conflict and it creates resentment in children. And that's something that we hope our parents could understand one day. And the next thing I want to bring up is family obligations and expectations. Now, this is another major theme. And the idea of putting the family before self is also very heavily emphasized. And we all know Confucianism has a heavy impact in Asian culture. A lot of its teachings is prevalent in China, Vietnam, other Southeast countries as well. And basically, he says the family setup is modeled after a government format where it's a hierarchy system with a father being the ruler, the patriarchy, and then the eldest son right under him, brothers, then wife, and then female daughters. So each member of the family has their own duties and responsibilities to fill in order to make the family a harmonious and successful one. I think this origin helps explain why Asian parents feel so righteous about giving us obligations that we have to fulfill. Some examples include setting a good example for younger siblings, raising them, making money to support the whole family. And even though some of these are so monumental and sometimes impossible to achieve, Asian parents still don't feel like there's anything wrong with it. They still feel that it's in their right to demand it, and they could even disregard their children's mental health over it. So I want to ask if any of you guys have anything personal you want to share that could make a case against this family obligations and expectation value Asian parents have.
Yeah, I can go first. Living extended family style where it's like grandparents, parents, and then me and my sisters moved out, but here I am.
Yeah.
They expect like, oh, like once you have your big girl job, you could take care of us because we're old and retired. Oh, like, like get us anything we want. Like when you get to that level, that's when you're okay to do whatever, because everything we came to America for would kind of be leveraged out and okay.
Yeah. I think all Asian kids have probably heard that growing up. Like, oh, we want to retire early. And once we retire, like you have to provide everything for us so we could live happily for the rest of our lives. And I feel like that's like the reason behind them pushing us and telling us to be successful. Tiffany, Jasmine, Kevin, do you guys want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking how sometimes I feel like our parents see us as their retirement plan. My parents actually have definitely changed their perspectives, but growing up, that was, the understanding that I had. Like I had to go make money, take care of myself because I saw my parents take care of their parents.
Yeah.
And I actually lived with both sets of my grandparents. So, seeing that's kind of what you learn. And I have a lot of respect that my parents have a different perspective on it now. Like, I think even my dad told me up front, he's like, I'm not babysitting your kids. Like, I'll hang out with them, but don't expect me to, take on that role for your children. So I appreciate that, but that wasn't my perspective growing up. And I actually wanted to share a little bit about the pressures and the expectations of being like the oldest Asian daughter. So when you talk about like the ranking in the hierarchy, right? I'm the oldest, but I'm a daughter. So that means I take on the female responsibilities of helping out my mom, taking care of the household. I didn't have to cook because my grandmothers took that role. But in terms of, kind of, I think one of my friends mentioned this is like the woman's role is kind of middle management, right? Like the male is the top dog.
Decision
then you've got like middle management enforcing all the expectations. And I don't know if you experienced this too, but I've heard of other people who said that like Asian daughters and their mothers typically have really rough relationships. And I think it's because of the expectations come from the male, the dad, but they're not translated unless like the mother does it. So that's where the conflict comes from. So I felt a lot of pressure being the oldest Asian daughter. And I think I am grateful for that experience because it taught me a lot of responsibility and how to be self-sufficient. But at the same time, I think it impacted my own view of myself. I was very critical of myself, and to some extent translated into anxiety with some things in my life because I didn't meet my own expectations.
For sure. Yeah. I could relate to the anxiety and the depression and the mental disorder aspect. If you guys are comfortable with sharing, Kevin, Jasmine.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off everything that was said, first I just want to preface, for myself, I appreciate everything that my family has done for me, right? And the sacrifices that they made coming to this country, from not speaking any English to, helping me provide the foundation that I have in my life right now. I'm truly grateful for it. And in terms of taking care of my family, I want to do it, right? It's not, I feel forced, but I do feel like there is a specific problem um, when especially when I see it, because my mom's a little bit more progressive with her thinking. She never relied on us for retirement plan, neither did my dad. But I see it happen with my mom, and I see how much it bugs her. And it's like this constant guilt tripping for their hustle. It's like, dude, we did not agree to this. We did not agree to this when we were born. And it's like this is imposed. And I understand why it's there, because it's kind of like an encouragement to want to do something like this, take care of your parents. But when it becomes like an obligation that you didn't sign up for, that's where I personally have a problem with it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think Tiffany used a very interesting term, retirement plan. Like they won't admit that because they think it sounds bad. But from what they're expecting, so I could live a few days of happiness and rest towards the end of my life. That's exactly what it is. And they feel that when they get old, they should be living with you and they should have everything provided to them, housing, food, supplies, and they could enjoy the last years of their lives. But to us, that sounds like obligation. It doesn't sound like a form of love. It sounds like it's restraint acted onto us.
Yeah, can I add one more thing too? It just adds on to like kind of like the communication issues in Asian families. They don't communicate it. They just like throw it on you, right? And yeah, I think that's a huge problem too.
And then jumping off of this, like also like Asians have a very interesting view on retirement homes. They think that's absolutely abominable. How like Western families throw their grandparents into retirement homes. They think that's absolutely unacceptable. That's like abandoning them from the family. Are your guys' parents similar in that aspect? Katie, you said your grandma lives with you, right?
Yeah, interesting that you say that, because they're like that, like absolutely unacceptable, because we have the ability to take care of them.
Yeah.
But when my family first moved to the US, my great grandma was actually in a nursing home, and that was fine. But it was because they were still adjusting to like American culture and stuff. So that was interesting, and they kind of said that was okay, but then it's not okay for them.
The double standards. Yeah.
I actually volunteered at a nursing home assisted living when I was younger, because we had to like, meet volunteer requirements in high school. And I remember feeling the same way. Like I felt really, like for me, I felt really bad for the residents there, because I was taught that meant their family didn't care about them. They just put them in this home. But as I'm reflecting as an adult, like when I'm old, it's probably fun to be in a retirement home with other people like that you can socialize with, that you won't like argue with in your family. You're not, subjected to being automatic babysitter for your kids' kids. So I wonder how my parents would feel now that like I understand that piece.
Yeah.
So I have a little something to share, and I actually resonate with Kevin's perspective, because growing up, my parents, I didn't realize, I sort of realized, that obligation piece where, your children take care of your parents, because that's been the history of, our culture, and it's been passed down that way. But my parents have said, outright before, throughout us growing up, this is not our expectation of you. Like we are, as your parents, will take care of you, and we will find a way to take care of ourselves. But we're going to give you everything, all the means for you to be able to be successful. But we personally, unlike, their siblings, don't have this expectation for you. And it's because, and they share, my dad's one of 15. My mom's one of 9. And growing up, and my mom's the oldest, my dad is one of the younger ones, but as a male, he assumed a lot of the obligation and responsibilities. And they said, they said that they weren't raised by their parents. They were raised by their siblings, or in my mom's case, she raised her siblings, and she said, we don't want this for you. And that's why they intentionally only had 2 children. And so in a weird way, by them not wanting, you know, outright saying that they don't want and or have this expectation of us, seeing the sacrifices that my parents have given to my brother and I to get to where we are today, I almost feel like there's an even more overwhelming expectation internally of myself to give back. And it's, and, you know, they absolutely don't guilt me into it, but it's this weird conundrum feeling where no, they don't expect it, but I have put their, you know, I have put that as my number one priority, you know, buy my parents a new house, make sure they're taken care of before I even get to the level where I can start a family of my own. And I'm still right there. So in the same lens, but just with a little different twist, I guess, from my perspective.
Totally admirable, Jasmine.
So you're doing it willingly. Intrinsically motivated,
right? And an interesting caveat in that is, you know, I have in the last 3 years been on this entrepreneur route, which Kevin has said something earlier, that when you are first figuring this out in your 30s, it's overwhelming because you have all these other responsibilities. And I always thinking back in my head, what if I had done this a decade earlier, had that been on that path earlier, where would I have been a decade later, right? But then that puts you in your head. Well, a little backstory for me is my brother decided to take the entrepreneurial journey straight out of college. He's 5 years older than me. And I have witnessed the unraveling of their relationship with that decision, because my parents don't understand technology, entrepreneurship, and all of that. And they're like, well, what do we tell our friends that you do? You're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, we can't explain it. And so seeing that, you know, is traumatizing for me, and in why I haven't been able to share that I've taken that path. But then also because for anybody who knows, doing entrepreneurship isn't always easy, and you're always, you know, either sometimes paycheck to paycheck or just figuring out, and you're always hustling. I've also had to assume a role of, you know, taking care of my brother for a little bit. And so it, you know, I sort of shifted from the younger sister to an older sister perspective when I was in corporate, but now we're sort of in the same boat.
Yeah, I totally relate to that part where you're saying like, hey, my mom's like, I don't know how to explain what you do to your for a living, because it was so much easier when she said pharmacy or something like that. And I totally relate to that.
And I was sorry, I was just gonna say, and so much more like you too, I was on that pharmacy track, and then I graduated and I decided I'm not doing it anymore. And I told my parents on graduation day, because I was waiting until the last moment, and they're like, what? But you know,
and it goes back to that expectation of doing a certain career as well, and it's a lot of pressure too. So
right.
I think that ties a little bit to the opposite of modesty, right? Like we're supposed to be modest about our abilities and our capabilities, but at the same time, our parents want to be able to brag about it,
but low-keyly brag.
Not to us, but
totally
to
brag
their friends. And so like the traditional measures of success in terms of your occupation, your salary, the house you might have, what car you drive, like all of those are like, I think, important pieces of our culture. And it puts a lot of pressure on us to fit a mold, to perform a certain way, to be on certain tracks as well. And you feel wrong when you don't.
I think that's an interesting phenomenon, how I often see Asian parents putting a lot of emphasis on reputation and prosperity. They define success in terms of materialism, like even more than Western culture. And that's interesting because America is a capitalist society, but I feel like Asian parents, they feel even stronger about having those things that define their status. Like, why do you guys think that is? I'm going to throw a curveball out there.
Well, I know from my family's perspective, they didn't grow up with a lot. So when you don't have much and you have the opportunity to have a lot, you want that for yourself and your kids. I wonder if it's the same like for some of the wealthier Asian families, because I know some like international Chinese students that you know are from mainland China. Their parents have money, so they sent them here to the U.S. to study. I wonder if they have similar pressures as well. I don't know actually, honestly, because I haven't had these types of conversations with them, but I know amongst like the Asian American culture, like that's important. And that kind of causes a culture of not enough. Like I can't tell you how many people I've met that are, you know, doing really well in corporate America. They're director, VP level, but they want more. Like it's just more and more and more. It's never enough. And that can be hard when you continue to chase more.
Yeah. Because what if you don't agree with their values? Like you don't enjoy living a luxurious and extravagant lifestyle. Because for some of us who's more assimilated and acculturated to the dominant white culture, it's more about independence, more about freedom. We're less obsessive with brand names and like nice bag, LV, Gucci, and all of those things. But it's interesting how Asians have like a obsessive nature towards those things. Yeah. And you guys have any other thoughts to add on this topic?
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of projection of values, man. You know, based off my experience, they're just projecting a lot. It's kind of funny. Again, communication. They never ask like what you want or anything like that. They just project these values,
For
like
real.
yeah. And
I got you a Hermes belt. Do you like it?
Yeah, but they never really ask like what we want to, and they come to these conclusions. So, and it's difficult, you know, because I feel like just in Asian culture, EQ isn't like emotional intelligence is very lacking, honestly, you know?
Yeah.
I think
well,
also,
I mean, at least
no, go ahead.
in a different way. EQ, I think like coming from collective society, there's a lot of like things that deals with like maintaining harmonious environment within society, within their culture, within their workplace. There's a lot of like aspects of saving face, avoiding shame, and also being hospitable and generous to other people. The ritual of gifting. I think EQ is taken in a different context in Asian society. Jasmine, what do you want to say? Oh, sorry. I'll come back to you.
I was just going to say that I think likewise in any other society as too, and I could be presumptuous of that, but I think it's also the influence of their peers, right? I say that more because in my parents' example, they're very simple people. But when I've noticed that when they've spent maybe too much time with, you know, their siblings or their friends, you know, then they get into this comparative, like, oh, you know, so-and-so's kids are doctors, they got this big house, so many cars. But then when you come back to our simplistic life, it's not a theme that they talk about. And so I think there's also that influence of just being around, you know, their peers that makes them, you know, go into like competitive hyperness drive where they then come home. So for me, it's always been, you know, kind of walking the line with it. On the one hand, I feel like they are comparing me. And on the other hand, they're like, you know, just go live your life.
I have a question actually to reflect on that, Jasmine. Do you ever think that they kind of talk about their friends and their kids as a way to motivate you to, or like push you? Because one of the things that I feel like I grew up with is tough love. Like they were always pretty tough on me, and it worked. Like when people shit talk me, like I put in more effort to prove them wrong. So maybe in some ways I proliferated that. But what are your perspectives on that?
I would say no, because they're kind of passive about it when it when it does come up. You know, I'm personally not I don't personally care about brands just because I like to spend more on experiences, and I've grown into that. But went through a phase where I was also influenced by my peers to keep up with the newest things. But now I'm a more practical person, and I see my father, and he's so much like that. You know, he's very practical. He will drive the car until it's like 300,000 miles, because it's like, if it's not broken, why do I need a new car? I think the one that does potentially get influence is like my mom. And I don't know if that's because it's from a more female influence, but yeah, I fortunately they haven't, been too outwardly comparative, but I catch it when they are.
Yeah.
And Sean, I'm sorry I interrupted you earlier.
Kevin, did you want to complete what you were going to say?
Well, I just wanted to piggy off that. Do you find this like happening because as Asians, there's a lot of different cultures. There's Vietnamese, all this sort of stuff. Do you see this happening more in certain cultures more than others? I guess, like based off your experience?
What I read was that China specifically, because they've gone through decades of such extreme poverty and agricultural culture, that with the economy boom of the turn of the century, a lot of people got rich. So it's because they were so deprived of that materialism that it almost changes their values to the point where they want to be able to showcase it. I think that kind of explains why my family also has that attitude, also share that attitude as well. They would buy me nice gifts, but I'm like, just give me the money instead. I can do whatever I want. Yeah, but like you said, like they don't ask you what you want. They give you what they think is worthy and valuable. Yeah.
And typically when they do that, they always, buy the best, most expensive thing out there. Yeah, even though it may not make the most sense. They roll out the red carpet and make sure they get the best.
Yeah. And lastly, I want to talk about modesty and humbleness, because I think this is another thing that's very unique in Asian culture that's not found in Western culture. Because in Western culture, it's the complete opposite. In corporate America, we value self-promotion and confidence and risk-taking. So it's very easy for Asian American children to feel conflicted and not being understood, and that cuts into their self-esteem. And in America, children are taught to be proud of their achievements so that they could build their confidence. But in Eastern culture, children are taught to be humble and not boast about it. And I think that creates a situation where parents are never acknowledging their children's accomplishments and not expressing approval or ever feeling proud of them, no matter how impressive their children could be. And I think that's because they were taught this way growing up. So they think it's justified to downplay our achievements and not to stroke our egos. But then I don't think they realize that this is inappropriate when we're growing up in a Western society like America. So this comes off as being unsupportive, disapproving, and critical. So I'm wondering if you guys have experiences that relate to this modesty and criticism aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's always been really hard to accept compliments or accept things that are really good, especially in the workplace or even right now in entrepreneurship. Like one of my clients the other day, I still catch myself doing this. He's like, dude, I love the work that you provide. Like, you're so diligent. And in my head, I'm just like, no, it's really not that great and whatnot. It's like, I hear my own Asian dad sometimes, like when I'm in these situations. But I think the thing is like, for me, I've been trying to catch myself and just say, hey, it's my pleasure, rather than, hey, it's not that big of a deal, But you're right about one thing. Western culture is so different, especially like have you guys ever heard of something called the bamboo ceiling at all? Yeah. I feel like this kind of plays into it, because in Western culture, you have to be certain, you have to be confident. Because if you say something like, yeah, it's not that, it's okay, it's no big deal, right? People actually take that at face value and the perception of your value actually goes down when you say that in Western culture, because we're not all
Yeah.
indoctrinated in this in this
Mm,
modesty as well. So
mm.
yeah, that's kind of like my experience so far at the moment.
Yeah. It's interesting because we actually want to talk about the bamboo ceiling within our SAV platform later on, how that really affects Asian Americans' performance in the workplace, how Asians are seen as less capable of holding leadership and management positions because they don't self-promote their accomplishments and they give credit to the team and they have a difficult time accepting their accomplishment done independently. Um, do you guys feel that it's also affected the way you work and how you're perceived in the workplace as well?
Yeah, I think coming off of what Sean said, I resonate a lot because I still find it awkward to accept, when someone says like, "Hey, you did a good job," or accept a compliment when it's related to work. And even if when you're going above and beyond, I feel like for me and for many of us, it's a part of the job, right? It's what you do. It's all we've known to do is not just do the work, but do it above and beyond. And even though it might seem like we're doing more than ask, it's an awkward thing sometimes when someone overly congratulates you and you're like, oh well, thanks. And I think also that resonates with the theme of how that translates over to confidence, because not at least for me, not that my parents didn't raise me to be confident, but I think once you step into speaking in confidence, you're walking a line of arrogance or even being disrespectful, especially if you're talking to, someone who's above you. And so it's like, well, I am confident in my work, but, am I potentially disrespecting, a hierarchy where I belong? So that speaks into that bamboo ceiling that you were talking about. You hit a point where, yeah, you can go above that, but it doesn't necessarily feel instinctively right because that's not, how you were raised or what's been instilled in you like all your life.
Yeah. And I think just the constant crushing criticism really like tears away from our level of confidence and self-esteem. We always feel like we're not good enough. There's always room for improvement. There's always another Asian that's going to be better than you, whatever you're doing. And
yeah, I'm like always second guessing the work before I send it out, even though more often than not, my clients respond back and they're like, this is fantastic. And in my head, I'm like, oh, and then I've been mulling over for like a whole week before sending it out. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess it's pretty good. But the over criticizing in my head and just living up in your head because of, everything that's been instilled up to that point, it's tough to get over.
Yeah, Jasmine, do you ever feel like, I feel like our stories relate a lot, but do you ever feel like the guilt of saying that you did something well, or like, at least I go through it.
yeah. Even if it's just the smallest bit of guilt, but I think, you hit an awkwardness first, kind of like, should I be feeling this way or should I feel proud, but yeah, a little bit. Yeah. And, even though I know that there's some projects that I, spend days and nights over. And like I said, I will let it sit. It's this, I think it's also in this theme of wanting perfection, right? I would let it sit there for a few days and go back to it and move on and go back to it until I'm like entirely sure that it's ready to be sent out. And then after I get wow, this is great, I look back on like the 2 days that might have been wasted. I'm like, could I have just sent it out when it was done?
I call that perfection paralysis.
Yes. I'm working
I feel that a lot. Sometimes it like prevents me even from starting things. Like it makes me like procrastinate because I feel so anxious about doing the best or, making it perfect. And part of that comes from some of the sentiments growing up, right? Like you don't want to misstep in the family structure. And so when you step outside of the family structure and that sort of culture, you take those same feelings and apply what you know to new situations, which can sometimes be in the corporate space.
Yeah. And this
Mhm.
follow-up question is, how are you guys dealing with the self-esteem that's almost been destroyed by our parents growing up? What are some things that you're doing now to get that back? And Katie, do you want to share some of the things you've been
Um,
going through to work on that?
yeah, definitely. Just finding a community that resonates with your own culture that you come up with yourself,
Uh-huh.
like living a bicultural life that can be confusing with
Mhm.
switching the on and
Yeah.
off button,
Mhm, mhm,
like what is working for you or not. So,
mhm,
what's been helping me is seeking therapy, and also recently I found a new church, and
mhm,
it's a lot of Asians there, so I
mhm,
think that really helps.
mhm, mhm,
Just be in a place where it's not normal to like,
mhm,
because at
mhm.
home it's not normal to receive compliments. So like when the
Yeah.
people in the community that you're in, they're saying like, wow, you're doing this really well and that, and
Uh-huh.
sometimes I have to second take that and be like, wait, what? But
Yeah.
then it just creates that environment where it's more open and okay, and um,
Yeah.
it's something new.
Yeah. So that we're aware that this is a cultural practice. It doesn't speak about who we are personally, so that we don't take those criticism to heart and damage the relationship ours, between us and our parents. Um, so I want to extend the question to the rest of you guys. How are you guys trying to repair that self-esteem that's just been torn apart by our parents growing up at school? I know that it definitely impacts how we perform in the workplace. How do you guys try to gain that confidence back socially, um, in relationships with the other people?
So I can speak. So basically, just to give people context that are watching this, I had a lot of I had a lot of drama with me and my dad, and I've always dealt with self-confidence issues because I felt like everything that I touched would would break, right? I couldn't do anything right because I was always getting yelled at. Part of it comes with the Asianness, but I also grew up with a dad who has PTSD from the Vietnam War as well. And so I struggled with that, and I still struggle with that. It bleeds into everything from, we talked about work earlier, into my romantic relationships as well, because scared, terrified. I'm terrified of committing as well because I feel like it's going to break. And even performance related type of things. And so I guess some of the things I've been really investing into as well, like the three areas, the most important things in my life are like the health, wealth, and relationships, right? And
Mhm.
so one, I've been investing into things like business coaches as well to kind of give me a more objective view, right? So I'm not like, so I'm not like, so I can ask them, hey, I have a supportive community where I can just ask them, hey, am I crazy? Like, like, can I get a second opinion on this? And they'll
Yeah.
give me a better view. Same thing goes with the coaching too, because I fall victim to workaholism, perfectionism, feeling not good enough, and just having that positive community. That's so important to me. And also like from my platonic relationships, my everyday friends, I
Mhm.
keep track of like who makes me feel really great as well, and spending more time with them, just going purely off feeling. And then something that's been game changing for me more recently has been therapy. Therapy
Mhm.
has really changed my life for a lot better, where, you know, it goes back, I don't know, it must be an Asian dad thing where, they see a problem, they just want to do it, they just want to fix it. And that's how I've been kind of approaching a lot of my life, where I don't really feel through my emotions. So when it comes to past like relationship issues or anything like that, I'm able to feel it a lot more. So therapy has been really game changing for me. And
Mhm.
honestly, I wish I did it 10 years ago, 12 years ago,
Mhm.
when everything happened. So that's how
Yeah.
I've been uh, getting
Mhm.
through everything.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're not the only one. All of us here have taken the initiative to seek therapy to help repair some of the baggages and trauma that we've experienced. So I want to invite Jasmine, Tiffany, and Katie to each share about how therapy has helped your self-discovery and relationships with your family. So we hope doing this could inspire some of the other viewers watching in the audience to also to be on the journey of self-discovery and to try to resolve some of the past conflicts they have.
I have a question for everyone. Like, have any of you brought up seeking therapy, you know, with your parents at like a younger age? Or was it not until like, because I actually haven't been to therapy. But I asked that because I remember when I was in high school, and I don't know what triggered it, but I asked my parents, you know, I think I need, you know, I would like to talk to a therapist. And their immediate response, like, what for? You're fine, you're healthy. What do you need therapy for? And in reflection of that, and while I haven't seen a therapist, I've been in very mindful reflections in the last few years. You know, do you also feel like it's a common theme with our parents that they don't understand mental health, what that is? You know, they're always constantly push, you know, do whatever it needs to survive. And if you have certain feelings about it, just push it to the side because you have to do whatever you have to do to put food on the table, right? And so mental health to them was just another hurdle to get past. And in the grand scheme of everything else, that was against them an easy hurdle to pass because it's a mind game. You know, mind game. I don't want to disrespect mental health by calling it that, but to them, they just see it as another challenge that they have to get over, and it's easier than, you know, having to find a job or anything.
Yeah.
I can totally relate to that, Jasmine, because I had mentioned to my dad before that I wanted to go see a therapist. And this was right after a pretty tough breakup that I had. And his response was, oh, you don't need to see a therapist. You're just sad because you really loved him. And I was just like, no, I don't think that's it. Because that particular relationship was very toxic. And I knew it affected me in ways that my other relationships didn't. And I knew I needed to figure or learn something. Like I needed to do something about the situation that I was in. And so I didn't listen to him. So I went to go see a therapist anyway. And, you know, my parents are pretty good about allowing me to make decisions for myself in some cases, and in some cases not. But in this case, I sought therapy. I've been going to therapy actually for just over half a year now. And to answer your question, Wendy, it's really changed my perspective on myself. And also the way that I see my parents, because it taught me to be more empathetic. Honestly, Kevin, when you were saying like, you were saying like feelings were just things that we had to work through on our own. Like, you know, that's how I kind of approached my life, most of my life, right? I just suppressed them and just had to go do what I had to do. I never spent time to think about how do I feel about the situation. It was just go, go, go. And I think our parents, in some cases, were like that too, especially mine, because they're immigrants to this country. Your point, Jasmine, about like them not having to focus on that because they had other more important things, right? It reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where like if your basic human needs aren't met, then you aren't able to, you know, realize self-fulfillment. So our parents were trying to figure out like food, housing, like survival.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't have time to worry about feelings. Like get over feelings. So anyway, looping back to Wendy's question, I really think therapy allowed me to be more empathetic to myself and also to my parents, and has improved our relationship because I feel like my understanding of their perspectives allowed them to see me in a different light, and as an adult and not the younger daughter that has to be obedient to them anymore.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Yeah.
What about Katie?
Yeah, I'd like to go off of that because very similar to Tiffany, but to have a little context, therapy showed me to understand like my biculture, being Asian and American, and then with the factors of needing to be obedient and being the oldest of 3 sisters, and just kind of always putting things on a back burner and being a workaholic and just trying to just please the family and whatnot. Therapy helped kind of organize just juggling so many things and create awareness of how I can handle that and whatnot. And then I also approached therapy because I want to change in my relationship with my family better, because things were starting to be resentful, the no change. So approaching therapy was like just like a different method I wanted to use to try to make a difference.
I'm really proud of you for doing that, Katie. I know it's especially harder for you because where you're located, there's less community for you to resort to. So really therapy is a good method for you to embark on that self-discovery process and to understand your identity and the biculturalism that you experience. And Kevin, do you want to share a bit about your journey? I know you recently started.
Yeah, so just to give people some context, I actually started therapy maybe July, because I was going through some major transitions in life. I still felt like, yes, there was a relationship aspect where I had this unusual like fear of commitment. It's not like normal, right? Compared to my friends and whatnot. And I was like, man, I gotta get this fixed. And just for context too, my dad, like I mentioned earlier, he had like PTSD as well. And it wasn't easy growing up. And I was developing all these self-confidence things, which were holding me back from my business, from promoting my business, all this sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that to bleed over into my future children, because that's really important. Because as I was telling you guys earlier, if you like, since my dad didn't do therapy, there's always a cost, and that cost falls on me at the end of the day. And so I just really want to fix it. But it's pretty interesting so far with therapy. Honestly, when I was looking for a therapist, I was like, man, I need to find someone that relates to me. So I found an Asian female. So pretty good. So I just connect with her, and I don't have to explain so much to her about the background. She just gets it. And that's important to me. But through therapy, we've been just really working on just being a lot more aware of my feelings, and really, rather than reacting and doing, really sitting within my feelings as well. And it's pretty crazy, like the other week, my therapist was saying, you know what, Kevin, like, you're actually happy. You sound happy this week. I was like, really? And then my Asian dad comes out. I'm like, am I really happy, Kevin? Like, like, should you be happy? You could always do more. But I think through therapy, it's all honestly allowed me to be a little bit more compassionate, and kind of like, yes, intellectually we hear this saying like happiness is not dependent on what you have or anything like that. But when you feel that, I was like, wow, okay, this makes a lot of sense. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience so far with therapy.
Thank you. Yeah, I really am really proud of all of our guests for sharing and being vulnerable about their personal stories. It's not easy to share in front of the camera, in front of a lot of viewers watching, and also talk about some of the things in the past that have hurt and how it also impacts our relationships with other people to this day. So this pretty much concludes everything. And before we go, I want to say a few things to our viewer. So we really hope that this episode, the discussions of Asian teachings and values, could allow some of you to understand your parents better and be more empathetic towards them, to let go of some of the resentment that you may be holding, and also hopefully we presented some ideas on how to properly communicate the detrimental effects their beliefs had on our lives. And then for the parents watching, we hope that we're able to make a strong case about the negatives of these values and how unrealistic it is and how it severely impact our self-esteem, work performance, and relationships. And we sincerely hope that our viewers would be able to become more connected and intimate with their parents and build closer relationships with people around them. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to Kevin's YouTube channel. So he's actually a content creator as well. Kevin, do you want to say a few things about your work?
Yeah, sure. I talk a lot about these issues. I actually rank for, I think, Asian therapy at the moment, speaking about mental health. But if you want to find me, it's kevinyee.tv. I talk a lot about entrepreneurship and everyday life issues, like me dealing with my father, Asian issues, and
I see.
relationship issues as well. So that's what I do.
Okay, great. Great. Sounds like it's very much related to our mission and our goal for our channel. Great. So thank you so much, Kevin, for partnering with us today. And thank you all our staff hosts, Jasmine, Tiffany, and Katie, for being vulnerable and sharing your story to allow our audience to learn more about you. And I want to remind everyone that next week we have Dating in the LGBT Community. Next Saturday, we'll be live streaming at 2:30 p.m. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye.